please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform. It only takes a minute and your feedback is greatly appreciated. Reviews help other people find the show and learn about the amazing topics we cover. Additionally, please turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And finally, please subscribe or follow the T2 Hubcast if you haven't already. Doing this means that you'll automatically receive new episodes as soon as they're released. Thanks so much for your support.
Welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Spencer Locker.
And me, Bernice Casserley.
I remember there was a friend of mine, Carl Griffiths. He's a very good friend of mine. I've known him for, well, it feels like forever. I say little lad. He's not a little lad, but he's a lad in South Wales. I just remember I worked with him extensively in my time in the military. Great guy. A very calming influence for me, even though he was a bit wild. But I remember one of the things that he said to me not that long ago, really, was just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. Which I think was, it wasn't necessarily aimed at me, but I just think it was a little bit of a molten golden droplet of wisdom that I just stuck in my head. And it reminded me of a time when, back in my youth, I suppose, was it my youth? Maybe 20s, whatever. Have you ever heard of something called the European Court of Human Rights?
No, tell me more about it.
Okay, so when we were, I won't go too deep into it, but basically, when we were in Europe, there was a thing called the European Court of Human Rights, and it did some amazing work for equality and bringing diversity to the fore, and it was an incredible organisation. I used to joke that you can't have the European Court of Human Rights without the European Court of Human Responsibilities, but people are painfully unaware of the responsibilities that go with those rights.
Yes.
Because that gives us a balance, doesn't it? Yeah. So when we start going back to Carl Griffiths, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
When we start thinking about the rights and responsibilities, yes, we've got rights, and you know what? Some people have worked very hard and they've suffered to be able to gain those rights, but nonetheless, there are responsibilities that go along with that.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a point of balance, and I look on this as a fulcrum point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's very, very easy for us to look at this as a generic piece and go, right, so my fulcrum needs to be in the middle. So when we look at our lives, our professional lives, our personal lives, whatever we are prioritising, sometimes we think that because that fulcrum point needs to be in the middle, if it is in the middle, but one side is weighted more than the other, you're not going to get that balance.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need to move that fulcrum point, which is a great concept to have, but what does that look like to you as an individual? Because it needs to be specific to you. It can't be generic, because you've got your own life. You've got your own responsibility, whether it's personal, whether it's professional. You've got these other things that's going, or lots of different things. Nobody's got exactly the same life.
Yeah.
So we need to identify what that fulcrum point looks to each of us to be able to gain that balance that we need. What are your thoughts on that?
I suppose my first question would be, how do people find that middle point, that starting ground? What does that look like and how to find it? Because would it be right in saying that not everyone really understands or knows what that looks like for them?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe so. But the thing is, with that in mind, I think that there is enough things out there, if you're paying attention, to be able to identify what that fulcrum point looks like. But I think the initial point is honesty and happiness.
Okay.
Are you happy? Because that TikTok that I put out. Oh, I didn't put it out, but that T2 put that TikTok out about me loving my job.
Yes.
And then there was so much comeback sort of saying, well, must be a bloody brilliant job because I hate my job.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual. I mean, all the way through my professional life, I'm sure you've been exactly the same position. You meet people who are hard work.
Yeah.
And they're hard work, not because they want to be hard work, but because they're in a position that they're not happy in.
Yeah.
Whether it's a job,
whether
it's a family, a situation outside work, or whether it's a mixture of the two. And again, when we start talking about being hard work, that's got depths. So it's not a binary choice. You're either great or you're annoying. Yeah. So again, when we start talking about that fulcrum point, we might look at our own lives and go, how are you doing? Be honest. Don't just go, I'm fine. How are you?
Everything's great.
But just be honest a little bit and go, well, you know what? I'm a little bit off kilter. I'm a bit off. Well, that might mean your fulcrum point is just away from just a little bit away where you need to be, or where you would like it to be. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you could be talking to somebody and they say, how are you doing today? How how you been? I haven't seen you for ages. I'm a bit fatigued, to be honest with you. I'm a bit tired, things are getting a little bit, I'm ready for a holiday. Okay, so that holiday is probably serving a purpose of bringing that fulcrum back into that pivot point, back into where it needs to be. Because at the moment, it's a little bit too far away. That's why you're feeling fatigued. You may have been working too hard. You may have been partying too hard. Because it's not all work, is it?
It's not all work.
It's not all work. So this is where we find that fulcrum point. Is identifying that, you know what, I'm not great, or I'm not the best I could be.
I think a lot of time as well, a lot of people, they sometimes don't really take the opportunity to evaluate things. So often in life's really fast paced. Like it's busy, and we're moving and jumping from one thing to the next. And how often do people really sit down and have a think about how they're showing up, or how they're feeling, or kind of what's going on in their mind, and the impact it's having on mental well-being and physical well-being as well. And that's something that's really important, because we do just move around from one thing to the next. I think as well, it's people need to sometimes really sit and think about, well, what does that balance look like for me, and where do I get my fulfillment, where do I get my enjoyment and happiness? I mean, you're speaking to someone with a print unconscious motivator to enjoy life and be happy, so it's something I can definitely connect with, and it's something that I can think about over the years as well, where I haven't found the balance. And there's been so many occasions where I haven't felt like I'm getting that happiness, and that has an impact to how I show up and how I behave. And a lot of people did see a lot of what we refer to as like shadow behaviour. That's me not in my best self. I'm not productive, probably not nice to be around at times. And the reason for that was because I didn't have that balance right. I was putting my focus and my energy in one area, but I was not sabotaging, but dismissing and not putting enough focus in another area. And I was probably thinking of that seesaw, I was tipping right over there.
Yeah.
And it's really important to stop and pause sometimes and address what's going on.
And why don't people do that?
I think sometimes it's people do that because it's the expectation of that's what they have to do. So for some people, it might be that sometimes work takes over their personal life. Why are they doing that? Is that because it's how they're wired? They're driven to kind of go after goals and to do really well in their career and get to a certain point. Maybe they do it because they feel as though they need to provide for their family and they need to have a really great salary. But then it's a case of, well, how does that balance itself out? Because you can do that and you can go off, and we've seen it happen with some of the people that we work with. They dedicate so much of their lives to their career. Sometimes outside of work, they're showing up as a completely different person, because they get home and it's almost like kind of this whole energy just shifts, because they can just release because all of that stress, then how busy they've been. And it's a case of then the people that they love dearly the most, and the people that spend the most time around them, the people they trust the most, see probably the worst side of them, because they haven't got that balance and they really struggle to say no to things. Work is busy for everyone, and I think as well there's been so many changes. Every single business, no matter how big or small, every single organisation has been impacted significantly and had significant amount of changes over the last 3+ years. And I think that's had a big impact on employers and employees as well. And I think, some people, it is a case of they just get crack on, let's just do it, let's get the job done, because that's what we're expected to do, or that's what I expect. I put that expectation on myself. But the reality is, can you continue doing that for a prolonged period of time?
Yeah, really good points. There's a lot. There's as you were sort of speaking there was cans of worms being opened everywhere.
Ping, ping, ping.
Yeah. But it's. I think you make some really valid points there, and I think that can I ask for yourself?
Yes.
You said there was a period of time where you didn't have that balance.
Yes.
How did you manage to get past that?
Sometimes it can be making quite a big decision. I mean, earlier on in my career, when I first started off in learning and development, I was up and down the UK all the time, and I just did it. I was very career driven in my early 20s, and it was very much of a case of, I'm going to do this because that's what I'm going to do, and that's where I want to be, and if I do this now, it's going to get me X. And so I did that, but the reality is that I didn't put myself first. I gained a lot of weight. I was really unhealthy. On a weekend, I would come back home on a weekend and I would just slob about and do nothing, because I was absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until there was the potential opportunity to change our roles, and I ended up changing changing my role so that I wasn't traveling all the time. And I knew I probably wasn't going to get as much enjoyment out of traveling up and down the UK and going here, there and everywhere, running and delivering training sessions every day. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And actually, although I initially thought I'm not going to enjoy this, I really enjoyed that job.
Right.
But then there's been other occasions as well when I've had that, and it has been a case of having to really sit hard and think and address, right, okay, what's going on in my life right now? And again, this is probably accelerated because for me, I'm very driven to enjoy life, be happy.
Yeah.
But I've had occasions where I've really had to sit down and evaluate what's going on in my life right now. Is that making me happy? What do I need to do about it if it's not?
Yeah, that's really good point. Really good point. I think one of the things that we do tend to find with people who make these decisions successfully, and again, when we start talking about making this decision, it doesn't necessarily have to be a binary thing. However, sometimes we've got to be disciplined, haven't we?
Yes.
We've got to sort of say, right, okay, then. So this thing over here that I like isn't necessarily serving me well.
Yeah.
This thing over here that I want to like, I need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I need to be disciplined enough to not do that and do this over here.
Yeah.
But again, when we start talking about discipline, you can be talking about some people who are extremely disciplined. I'm not saying it comes easy to them, but it's their mindset, it's the way they live their lives that have got that extreme discipline. Whereas we've got other people in other areas who might not be quite as disciplined.
Yes.
And it's just a case of, well, okay, you know what? I'll have that bit of cake today. I'll kick off tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll start the fitness regime tomorrow or whatever. But that has the capacity. And I'm being a bit sort of flippant there. But it's this discipline of, right, what do I want to achieve and how do I want to achieve it?
Yeah.
So now we're going into challenge state mindset.
Yeah.
We're starting to talk about recognizing what's important to you, looking at evaluating your life.
Yeah.
Because when I say evaluating your life, I'm not necessarily talking about life-changing things.
No, but just having a little
there may be sort of little things that you go, right, okay, so this thing isn't serving me well, and because I'm doing this isn't working well. So how am I going to be able to gain control over this? Well, I need to do less of this.
Yeah.
So then we can even flick back to Michael Bungay Stanier there. If I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? Because there's only so much water in the fountain, isn't there? There's only so many hours in the day. So you can't say yes to everything because you're just going to be maxed out,
yes.
whether that's personal or professional.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand that this thing that's important to us that we do want, if I'm saying yes to this, then I've got to let something slip somewhere else. And whatever that may mean, you've got to make that decision, haven't you? You've got to have that discipline to be able to do that. Your wants and your needs, your requirements were probably different, maybe slightly different, maybe totally different.
Yeah.
We've got to keep on top of this, keeping in touch with ourselves. What is it that I want to do? Have I achieved this fulcrum? Have I got the balance that I want? And if not, it's my responsibility to do something about it. Because again, when you sort of say with the expectations, my job, my career, well, I have to do this to do this. I have to. It's expected of me to do, and well, that's all well and good. But when we start talking about the expectations, when we start talking about people who are giving you opportunities, you can't control that. And I suppose you could influence it to a certain degree, but that's not in your control. So what you've got to do is, rather than feeling overwhelmed and that fulcrum point being too far one way or the other, and now you're in a shadow self because you know what, I've sacrificed all this to get a better position, possibly to get a better salary, so that my family can have a better life-work balance. But to achieve that life-work balance, I've got to achieve an imbalance.
Yes.
I've got to sacrifice this family time, maybe, to be able to achieve this thing, which is going to give me more family time, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I suppose one of the things that we've got there is focusing on the controllables and not the non-controllables.
The next T2 Leadership Retreat will take place on the 7th to the 9th of May 2024. To book your place on the ultimate leadership development experience from the People Performance People, or for more information, please visit www.trans2performance.com.
One of the people that we've worked with, they want to climb the corporate ladder. Don't get me wrong, it's not a cold thing, but they love the job.
Yeah.
But they were getting a little bit, not necessarily bored, but they needed more challenge. They needed taking outside the comfort zone, so they were given more challenge. And very quickly came to the conclusion that it wasn't within their capacity to be able to deal with it.
Yes.
So their choices initially were, well, I'll go back down.
Yeah.
I'll go back down a level and I'll get back. And that's I suppose that's a failure, but you can also think to yourself, well, is it tactical?
Yeah.
Is it
Doing the right thing.
Again, I'm getting stressed out because I can't do my job.
Yeah.
But then they started thinking, right, well, what's in my control? Well, what I can do is I can ask for a bit of coaching. I can gain a mentor. I can do a little bit of studying. I can read up on it rather than just accept that this is too much for me. Well, educate yourself.
Yeah.
When I say educate yourself, I'm not saying that is always the answer, but you can look at the problem and go, right, okay, so what is in my control to be able to enable me to be able to deal with this thing?
Yeah.
And it might be, you know what, I've got to ask questions. It might be that I've got to admit that maybe it's challenging for me, not impossible, but it's challenging for me. So I might have to go to somebody else and go, can you help me out here?
Yeah.
Again, that's going to need a lot of psychological safety, but it might be a case of, all right, I'm going to put myself through a college course, or maybe go back to your boss and say, look, I've identified a thing that I can do that's going to make me better at this job.
Yes.
Is there any chance that we might have a contribution thing? They might have something going on. They might have, well, you know what? We've got a course like that, and we can put you on. And there's so many options, but it's recognising it and taking responsibility, making yourself accountable, I suppose.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Accountability is huge in every kind of aspect of life. It might be that you've got kind of, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to climb the corporate ladder and I'm going to kind of get this particular role. But if that challenge is a bit too much, or maybe you've got some kind of gaps as well, or you realise and have that moment when you think, oh my goodness, actually, I need to like pull my socks up and I've got quite a bit of work to do here in order to make this successful, then you need to really sit and think about, right, okay, so what can I control in this situation? How am I going to make it happen? Because so often as well, links back to what you were saying earlier, Spence, people almost have like these kind of, I have the right to this promotion, like I've worked for this business for however many years and I've been here longer than that person. It's expected that I have it. I'm entitled to it. And it's a case of, well, is that true? Let's have a little think about that. But then also as well, it's right, okay, so if you do get that opportunity, well, how are you going to make yourself accountable to actually achieving and doing whatever that job is and getting results?
Yeah, I find that my mental, emotional well-being suffers more when I lean more into my expectations than my gratitude.
Right.
So if I have certain hey, don't get me wrong, I ain't the end article. I was listening to that podcast. Remember that podcast I recommended to you the other day?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And we were talking about, one of the analogies they were talking about was, are you the finished article? Because the race in professional circles is, I want to get as the best I can be. I want to get to be the finished article. When actually, we're all masterpieces, but we're all unfinished masterpieces.
Yeah.
And every time we go through, every little bit of life is just another dab of colour.
Yes.
And when we finish that, when that masterpiece is finished, is usually our last day on earth.
It is. Yes.
So don't race towards that finishing the masterpiece. It's the journey rather than the destination.
Yes, and I think as well, so many people get consumed by that they forget and to take a moment to sit and really appreciate what's going on right now. Because people they're so forward focused that they sometimes miss the present.
Yeah. And just to sort of paraphrase what you said earlier on, one of the things that you said was life moves pretty fast. You ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
No.
Right, so in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, when he's doing a monologue to camera, he turns around and he says, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you'll miss it.
Yeah, it's true.
So, there's that dabbing the pedal, dabbing the brake pedal. But again, we've also got to understand that for us that works, but there's some people out there who are going, no, we've got to go to that, we've got to get that flag on the hill, and because that's their unconscious motivator.
Yes.
And you know what? I fully appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, I do believe that dabbing the brake pedal works for everybody, but how long you stand on the brake pedal for is going to be varying, yeah? Because again, when we start thinking about this and we start thinking about this fulcrum point, you might think that your life is, you've achieved that fulcrum point and you've got the balance that you require, but you might get put on a project, or you might get put on an account, or you're given a job, and the fact that this is new,
yes,
or it might not be new, but it might have people included in it that are challenging for you, or aspects of it that you might not feel comfortable. So in that particular moment, that fulcrum is going to move.
Yes.
Yeah? And there's some people who love to be challenged, and that fulcrum might move a little bit. Yeah, okay, I like this. It's a bit of a challenge.
Come
I feel
on, then.
uncomfortable, but you know what? I'm relishing it. I'm stepping into it. I'm leaning into it. I'm doing what I've got to do. But there are other people with that little change, actually, because it's a small change, and they're like routine and structure and things like that. Well, that fulcrum point could be quite a significant move. So for them, in the days, weeks, and months after that fulcrum point has moved, they are struggling to get that fulcrum point back to where they need to be. So it's different for everybody, and I think that's one of the things that we're sort of trying to get to, really, is the fact that taking accountability and taking responsibility depends on your honesty with yourself.
It does.
And you've got to be honest, and you've got to sort of recognise things, and you've got to sort of go, right, this is what it looks like to me. Yes, it's because it looks like that to me, I can be accountable, take responsibility, I can make changes, I can take control, and I can exert that control, so I can try and get it in. But if you don't take that responsibility, if you don't make yourself accountable, that's when you go into shadow, and it's like, oh, life's happening to me, rather than me being part of life.
It's victim mindset.
Yeah, and that entitlement can really sort of drive it in. I should be here. I would be head of department if it weren't for them over there.
Yeah.
I would. Well, actually, okay. So what you're doing is you're giving control to that person over there. They're controlling your life. They're controlling your destiny. So how's about you taking control? How's about you moving that pivot, finding that fulcrum, and going, right, so what can I do to actually achieve what I want to achieve, and get that balance? And again, the balance might be, you know what, I'm massively into my career, so that's very, very important to me. Not a problem.
Yeah.
But there's some
and if
people.
It works, then fine,
If you are absolutely honest with yourself and that is what you want to do, that's great. I've got no problem with that whatsoever, because we're all different. We've all got different viewpoints. We've all got different unconscious motivators. We've all got a different sense of purpose. But as long as you're honest with yourself and you've got the clarity of going, right, actually, this is what I want. Maybe it's stressful. Maybe it's loading you down. Okay, so what can I control to move that pivot so that I get that balance? So it might be development, self-development. It might be education. It might be coaching and mentoring. It might, whatever. But for some people, it's like, well, I'm actually doing this and it's weighing me down, but the reason I'm doing this is to give me a better life-work balance.
Yeah.
But are you getting a better life-work balance?
And when are you going to get that as well? Because sometimes you can just, you're in that mindset that I'm doing this now and I'm going through the hard times now, so that at this particular point it will all pay off. It's all going to be great. It's all going to be worth it. When does that happen? And actually, how much, and is it going to be worth it after spending, for some people, years of exhaustion, fatigue, misery, upset, or stress, anxiety, whatever it might be? Is it really worth it?
Yeah.
And it might be yes. In which case,
exactly. Crack on. I mean, I was you do a bit of walking, don't you? Hill walking,
yes.
and all this and the other. So I was talking to a guy the other week, and he was talking about him being a false summiter. He loves the false summit. It drives him. It motivates him. He gets to that summit where he thinks he's there.
Yeah.
And he's sort of thinking to himself, he's in the back of his mind, well, when I achieve this, what's next?
Yes.
But actually, what that creates is another run. So you get to that summit, and it's like, oh, I've got another hill to climb here.
Yeah.
And it's a constant, rather than looking for that peak, looking for that, I've reached ultimate fulfillment, and that for him would be ultimately disappointing, because it's all downhill from there on.
Yeah.
Whereas for him, he's a serial false summiter. He loves it. It motivates and enthusiasm, and I get it. I do. Not for me, but absolutely, I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, I like that. I like it.
Any more thoughts?
So I suppose if we're thinking about what we want people to try and get from this podcast, I suppose the first part is being honest with yourself. What does that balance look like? I always think when it comes to taking accountability of things, the very first step is acknowledging reality. What is the reality right now? What do I want out of things? Kind of what does kind of either end of that kind of look like for me? What is the middle? How do I find that balance? And I think it's really important to then start really thinking about actually what is it that is in or within my control? Am I spending my energy focusing on things that I can't control and that I can't influence? In which case that's going to be tiring and that's going to be frustrating, but also as well that's when we start to kind of dip in regards to levels of accountability, and it can consume us. So what is it that we can influence? What can we control? What's the situation right now, and what is it that I want? Am I chasing for things? Am I focused way too far ahead that I'm actually actually maybe missing a few things that are happening in the present around me. Because again, it's so easy to do that when life's fast paced and it's energetic, and that's what I prefer to say rather than busy. But yeah, and actually kind of, what is it that you're going to be responsible for? What actually is it that you can do to take away in order to make that balance a little bit better for yourself? You can't just say, I really want to spend more time out and about. I really want to spend more time kind of on my fitness and get healthy. But you might say that, but the reality is, are you actually taking any steps in order to find that balance? Because again, so often we say, I know that I spend too much time or too much energy on this, and I know that I need to focus on that area a little bit more, but sometimes that's all it is. We're just acknowledging it, but we're not doing anything about it. And that's really important, because that's where we need to find a solution and actually commit to it, own it, and make it happen.
Yeah, I think that is a great statement to finish on. Absolutely brilliant. I fully concur there, Bernice. Look, we've had a great half an hour. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Great to have a chat, as always.
Yeah.
So that's the end of today. I hope everybody's had a good day. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast and taken something away. So until next time, from the T2 Hubcast, bye-bye now.
Bye.
Are you a fan of our podcast? If so, make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter by searching Trans2 Performance. By following us, you'll have access to exclusive content, special announcements, and more. Join the T2 community today.